Hello? Is there anybody there? Hello?
There used to be a way to stick it to the man. It was called rock and roll. Guess what? Oh, no. The man ruined that, too, with a little thing called MTV.
Don't talk to me about rock and roll. I'm not there in the clubs and on the streets, and I'm living it. I am rock and roll.
Did I listen to pop music because I was miserable? Or was I miserable because I listened to pop music?
Okay, so I wanted to try something just a little different. With, the busy summer schedule, it's hard to kind of regularly release episodes between Aaron and myself. So this is something that's going to be entirely different from normal, and we'll see where it goes. I figure this is a chance to kind of try something. So this episode, it's just me, all by myself. So we'll see how much you like listening to just one person talk and how long I can talk by myself. But anyway, the album I figured we would talk about today just came out the day I'm recording this. I'm talking about the Appleseed Cast and their album, The Fleeting Light of Impermanence. It's been something like, I think, 6 or 7 years since they released their last record, The Illumination Ritual, which I got to say, it's been a long time. Now, for me and the Appleseed Cast, I think I've mentioned this before on the show, how I credit them in a lot of ways for kind of changing the way I look at guitar, specifically their record Two Conversations, which easily for me makes my, I'd say, top 10 list of favorite records of all time. And I know a lot of people might look at that, especially Appleseed Cast fans, and go, that's not even their best record. I know a lot of people love the Low Level Owl Volume 1, Volume 2, which I like those as well. And realistically, I guess, because they sound guitar-wise very similar to Two Conversations. So I guess, in a sense, I could easily say that those albums changed the way that I play guitar as well, except I want to say that Two Conversations was the album that really, really got me into the Appleseed Cast. I had a buddy, his name's Ryan, who just happened to be a huge fan. I think he actually played a few of their songs in his wedding. When I say played, I don't mean he played them on guitar. They were used in his wedding, and he was all about Two Conversations at that time. And so he got me on board, really started digging that record, and then, from there it was just like, explore everything that the Appleseed Cast has available. Of course, Peregrine came next, and that record was great as well for me. That was the first one I actually bought as it was brand new. And absolutely, listen to that record over and over and over again. And that's just the way the Appleseed Cast has kind of been for me. But in recent years, kind of after that record, they came out with Sagarmatha. I apologize for saying all of these titles probably wrong, but Sagarmatha and then the Illumination Ritual and stuff like that. And there were bits on those albums that I liked. And liked quite a bit, but all in all, I always kind of found like they weren't very focused for me as far as like songwriting was concerned. And I mean, that could just be, my take on those records and, sort of what I thought of them. I haven't really taken the time to look up and see, how did they do as far as reviews are concerned, and what are other people's opinions on those records? Because in the end, I don't think that really matters. I think music is obviously all about what you think of it and how it speaks to you and how it moves you. So I mean, anyone who's a big fan of those records, that's cool. That's all. Like I've gone through and listened to them a number of times as well. They've just never grabbed me quite to the same way as Low Level Owl, those two records, Two Conversations specifically, and Peregrine even, because the thing about Peregrine is it showed such like a kind of a drastic change for the Appleseed Cast at that time, at least because they'd had, there were some pretty big changes from the early records into like Low Level Owl and Two Conversations. But Low Level Owl and Two Conversations sounded fairly similar. Maybe there's a little less of the Pink Floyd vibe on Two Conversations as we saw on Low Level Owl, just like letting things kind of take their time and really breathe, whereas Two Conversations was a lot more about the songs for me versus like that overall album experience. Although obviously still on Two Conversations, that overall album experience is still a thing because I mean it's a concept record. That's kind of the point. It tells one story. It's gotta all be cohesive in some way or another. So Peregrine just, and maybe that big shift was in the production of that record and how it sounded versus, the 2/3 records that came before it. But it was definitely an album that spoke to me and hooked me. And then, I kind of, as can happen, got away from what was going on with the Appleseed Cast. Their next couple records didn't really capture or catch me as much. But that brings us up to this record, The Fleeting Light of Impermanence by the Appleseed Cast, and their latest. So my excitement for this record all kind of came out of nowhere, I guess you could say. I didn't really know what was going on. I was following the Appleseed Cast on Instagram, seeing the odd update here and there. That was about it, though. And then all of a sudden, and maybe this was just a thing, they dropped a new single, and then there was a post about tour dates. And on those tour dates, there was one listed for where I live in Edmonton. And I thought, man, that's rad. That's cool. I've never seen them, never thought. It was kind of this band where I was sort of at the point where I'm like, I'll probably never see them. And that's a shame. But, unless I'm about to travel, I'd had some friends who'd gone down to Seattle to see them, back probably in the Peregrine days. But I'd never really thought, they'll come up here. But lo and behold, this tour, they're coming up here. So kind of started that, that whole process of going, okay, let's listen to some of these, these last couple of records that I didn't familiarize myself as much with. Let's do this. And so I did that. And in doing that, definitely, came to grow a bit more appreciation for, for Sagarmatha and as well as Illumination Ritual. But this record that they just released as of recording this today, I don't even know what to say. It's a fantastic record. And in a lot of ways, it feels like they've gone back a little bit as far, for me, as far as sound is concerned, back but going forward at the same time, I suppose, because production-wise, the overall sound of this record reminds me a lot of Peregrine, and just like that very raw, live, roomy sort of vibe going on with it. And from what I understand, when recording this album, that it is exactly that. There is no, while you can hear reverb on the instruments, none of that is, put on in post. It's all just mic placement and set up in the room and how they recorded that, trying to capture, a natural reverb. And then even when they recorded the drums, and that's the reverb they got with the mic placement, they then put their amps, kind of in accordance to those room mics to try and make that all feel, as live and alive as it does. Because when listening to this record, it all feels like one piece. I don't know if that makes sense. There's a lot of room to breathe on this record, I find, in not only in the sound itself, the the production, but also in the songwriting. They introduce, and this is something they've done in the past. There's a lot of instrumental stretches where it kind of and does its thing for a little while and then opens up into a song. You go, okay, where Chris comes in and actually starts singing, and you're like, yeah. All right. And which is what I kind of on those records in the past, the last couple ones where I kind of went, I never really got that feel where they did it a couple times, but I just didn't feel as though it breathed as much in those songs where all of a sudden Chris starts singing or it opens up or what have you. But on this one, through the first 1/2 listens that I've given it, I just feel like you put it on and everything feels like it has its place and it has its purpose. And, I'm not in any way saying, it's a perfect record because, at this point on those first couple listens, it definitely hasn't, supplanted any of those earlier albums that I really enjoy. But at the same point, it's very much like this, man, this feels good. This feels like where I expect the Appleseed Cast to be. And they start playing, a little bit more with synth work in this. And I just think it fits so well. They've always had piano, keys, organ sort of stuff on a lot of their records in the past, but this, they actually lay into synths, and it feels very much like it's a part of the Appleseed Cast, like it's always been there, like it should be there. And I fully 100% absolutely love it. It doesn't feel like it's something they're trying to do for the sake of, doing something different. Maybe that's where it comes from. I guess Chris was saying in an interview that I read that, he at one point wanted to write an entire synth album, where it was just synth, bass, and drums, no guitar. and then he had to realize that they are in fact a guitar band. So that's, what had to happen to finish the record was to go with what they were. But all in all, this record, the synth, the way it feels, the way it flows, and it's not on every song. It kind of starts in the beginning, you hear it in the middle, and then you hear it again towards the end for the most part, like those big synth parts. It is, it fits. It's the Appleseed Cast, and there's not a whole lot more really to say about the synths. But just going back, like Chris having, sort of the realization that, oh, hey, the Appleseed Cast is a guitar band. The guitar work on this album, again, I feel like, they definitely, on the last few records, to me, tapped into more of, kind of the post-rock vibe, whereas, maybe earlier it was they were showing a little more of their emo roots, melodic roots, sort of stuff, and then the sounds, at least in the production of guitar, took that post-rock vibe for sure in the last couple. But the guitar on this just seems so much smoother. And there's a couple times on the record where I feel like, maybe there's a focus on a specific instrument, a specific part in a song, whether, it's the synth or there's some bass parts that really kind of get, kind of spotlighted, highlighted a little bit. And then there's also, like the guitar work or drums. Like that's probably the biggest thing on this record that reminds me of Peregrine is just the sound of the drums. And there's a specific drum part. At this very moment, it kind of escapes me. It was on one of the first two singles that they released on this record, but it comes in and just the kick on it is very much in your face. There's a bit where it's just like da 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 as I try to make drum noises with my mouth. That's what this show is all about. The instrument noises I make with my mouth. But yeah, there's just so many different aspects on this record that I go, oh, now I'm focusing on this, or now I'm focusing on this. Now this is what's drawn me in. And I really feel like they accomplished something because that's the way it worked for me in the past, I feel. And now it's just like expanded a little bit more with the addition of the synths on this record. But, looking back at those, like Two Conversations or Peregrine especially. Peregrine is like with that record, there would be, oh, this guitar part is what's catching me here, or oh, this this specific drum fill or beat that he's got going on is what's driving me and pulling me in. And that happens a lot on this record. The thing I would say that separates this record for me from Peregrine is the fact that it feels like one sort of journey. And I haven't taken the time to really read the interviews or, read the lyrics to see, like, I would not be surprised if this album is telling, one story. If it is, in fact, a concept album, even just judging by, the song titles, it has that feel to it. And I mean, maybe, as time goes on, it's something I'll look into and I will, get to know the lyrics a little bit more. But this is just kind of like a quick, I've listened to this a couple times. I want to try this new format for the show, so we'll see what happens. But, yeah, it does that for me on this, where it just feels like one piece almost that they've structured together so well. And that's really, the kind of thing that really is like scores big for me when it comes to talking about albums. And, I've said this before, I don't necessarily consider myself, to be reviewing albums. I'm not sitting here to an extent going through, well, I think they did this poorly, they should have done this sort of thing. Just talking about, kind of the things I've taken out of this record. So yeah, in the end, I would though definitely say, after I say I'm not reviewing things, in the end, I would say you should definitely give The Fleeting Light of Impermanence by the Appleseed Cast a listen. If you're unfamiliar with the Appleseed Cast, definitely get in on it. If you're someone like myself who, maybe the last couple of albums from the Appleseed Cast, you've been with them for a while but weren't huge on them, maybe this one will surprise you. I think I read somewhere, I saw like a little headline thing or whatever that says, oh, the Appleseed Cast released their best album in over a decade. So, take with that what you will, or take from that what you will. But, yeah, it's definitely a good listen. I look forward to listening to it more. I feel like it's going to be a good like road trip album, especially going back to that, how everything feels like one sort of piece, or, different pieces that all move together well. But yeah, that anyway is going to do it for this episode of Music to My Peers, the solo episode. We're doing the solo tour right now of Music to My Peers. Wherever you find this podcast, make sure you rate it, review it, that kind of stuff. Tell your friends about it. Help get it into more ears. If you know any Appleseed Cast fans, share it with them. I'd like to know what you think, what your thoughts on this record were. And, of course, as always, you can follow me on Instagram and Twitter at David to My Peers. But other than that, that's going to do it. So goodbye, friends.